the PS5 Pro has been announced at $700? What the hell are they smoking over there in Japan? But in all seriousness, this was the release announcement of the latest console coming out from Sony, the heavily rumoured PS5 Pro. And if you heard any of those rumours about what this console was going to be like, it's basically that. PlayStation released a video with Mark Cerny commenting on what makes this console so special and worth buying, with what he called the big three, those being a bigger GPU, advanced ray tracing, and AI-driven upscaling, with a whole load of tech specs that culminate in a claimed performance uplift of about 100%, or basically double the performance. And like a lot of people, I have some thoughts. But first, what exactly is this PS5 Pro, and what makes it so, quote-unquote, Pro? The PS5 is the answer to that choice of graphics modes: graphical fidelity for a prettier picture, or higher frame rate for a smoother gameplay, aiming to make the fidelity mode reach a 60 FPS target for all games, essentially trying to eliminate 30 FPS fidelity modes. As from their data, gamers weren't choosing fidelity modes, opting instead for a higher frame rate experience in a ratio of 3:1. So the console itself will contain a larger GPU with a claimed 67% more compute units, along with 28% faster RAM, which is claimed to produce around 45% faster rendering, or basically a 45% boost in performance. There are improvements to the ray tracing performance with claims of up to triple the speed of ray tracing calculations, okay? And probably the most interesting aspect is a new PSSR, or in long ways, PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. And if you're familiar with PC terminology, it is the PlayStation's version of DLSS or FSR, using the GPU to render the game at a lower resolution and using AI to upscale the game to make it look like a higher resolution than it actually is, leading to a higher frame rate. With these features combined, it is claimed that the PS4 Pro could be double the performance of the regular PS5. But now, let's get into my opinions of this new console. Right, so the first thing that must be said, that price, £700 here in the UK, $700 in the US, and €800 in the EU. Insane. Seriously, it is absurd. And I assure you, it's absurd for those other countries as well. Well, firstly, I can get a digital PS5 for under 390 quid, nearly half the price of the PS5 Pro. And why the digital version? Well, that's because the PS5 only is a digital console. There is no disc version. So, if you want a disc drive on your new Pro console, then you will have to buy that separately, taking the total to nearly £800. And if you include the vertical stand, if you have your console vertical, it takes it over. Really? Like, to me, it's just pure insanity. Like, the only thing really from the release specs that could really justify a higher price is it does include a 2TB SSD, more than double in the SSD space. So they're not that cheap, so it's not awful, but we are talking about a mid-generation console here. Not a whole new generation, not the PlayStation 6. So the price, I think, is going to be a massive turn-off for so many people, making them not want to upgrade their existing console, or even buy the Pro compared to the base models if they want one or the other. And at the price with everything included, it's generally started to make the PC look truly competitive price-wise, as really the only advantage consoles have ever had over PC was their price to performance. And now this Pro model has put a massive spanner in the works. And so this Pro console will obviously, it's going to be more powerful than the current PS5, with the goal of getting over 60 FPS in games for their fidelity mode. As they said, 75% of players choose that 60 FPS mode rather than higher fidelity modes. Like, okay, that seems reasonable. I definitely use the 60 FPS mode when it's available compared to fidelity. The only game that I've ever used fidelity mode in would be Horizon Forbidden West, because there was actually a massive difference that I could tell from the fidelity to the performance mode. And the 30 FPS for a game like that with motion blur didn't really affect me that much compared to some other games. We do want games to look better, of course, and play smoother, but here's the thing. For the examples that were shown in the presentation, it needs to be said that there are diminishing returns to this, as in the Ratchet & Clank and Spider-Man example that they showed, are you really going to notice like the background details when you're going through fast-paced in Ratchet & Clank or swing you through the city in Spider-Man. Like, are you really going to be noticing that at gameplay, or are you going to be focusing on the main character and the objectives or the enemies? As like I said, there's many games I've played on PlayStation where I generally cannot tell the difference in fidelity and performance mode except for the frame rate difference. To me, a lot of them just look the same because there's things like how far are you away from your TV? How big is it? And other factors that play into what makes a game look good. So I do think for most games, it's not going to be noticeable graphics-wise without pixel peeping, getting right up close to your TV or monitor, to be like, oh, right, so that pixel is here in the Pro version, not in the normal version, so this one's better. Like, that's basically what they were showing in their examples. Although from the wording, it sounded like they wanted to get rid of the choice.
Removing that decision, or at least narrowing that divide, is one of the key targets for PlayStation 5 Pro. We want to give players the graphics that the game creators aspire to, at the high frame rates that players typically prefer.
Which I think is just bizarre, because there really should be a fidelity and a performance mode. But now, if this is the Pro version, the performance mode should be able to push the frame rate to 90 or even 120 FPS in games, because it still has so much power added into it. So why don't you have that? Why are you trying to just make games look better? Like, if that was the choice, genuinely, fidelity mode was at 60 FPS and performance mode was at 90 or 120, I still think that, like me, many people, if they had a display capable of that, certainly would still pick the performance mode just to have the higher frame rate. Because the games are still going to look relatively the same. And the only improvement that I genuinely think might have an impact is the ray tracing improvements, as those sorts of lighting changes, they're much more noticeable than looking in the background. Like, I remember playing Cyberpunk 2077, the full game with path tracing on. It was astounding. The best looking game I've seen. Same with Metro Exodus with ray tracing. Excellent. So I do think the ray tracing improvements might actually have a more significant impact into making the games look and feel better. And that's the only thing I genuinely think will be a positive from this console. Let's take a look back at the PS4 Pro, as when that launched, that had one job: to get 4K gaming out to everyone. Because after all, at that time, 4K TVs were getting into people's living rooms, bedrooms, and they were becoming much more common. And like nowadays, they're basically everywhere. I generally think it's harder to find a 1080p screen now than a 4K. And not to mention, the PS4 Pro wasn't that much higher priced, and it was several times more powerful than the regular PS4, compared to this one, which is much higher, nearly double, and only double the performance, supposedly. Like, I just feel like this one isn't needed. What sort of reason would there be? Like, people are happy with their performance modes. Yeah, of course we'd want games to look better, but the performance mode is good enough for most of us. However, I think this is a console that Rockstar pushed out for. I think when Mark Cerny said that,
but when I talk to them, I do hear about their desire for more graphics performance.
Developers wanted more graphical power. I think they were talking to Rockstar about that one, as I bet this is a machine specifically for GTA 6. And even though I think even the Pro version may struggle, it's certainly going to be the best experience for that game, because I really don't see Microsoft releasing a Pro console at all this generation. I think we would have seen rumors and leaks and maybe an announcement now if they were planning it, but I just don't see them doing it. But it would be nice to see, if they could do it at a much lower price. I think it would be similar to the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, as God knows that was one hell of a price scare, but I do find it quite unlikely that Xbox would do this. And whether to buy it or not, it's all going to come down to the games. Like any console or PC, it's down to the games, as what games are going to take full advantage of the new power available. And yes, they've said over 8,000 PS4 games are going to be enhanced, whatever that means. I wish they actually gave an example. Like, if they would have said Bloodborne will be 60 frames per second on the PS5 Pro, excellent. No one would be complaining about the price right now. Everyone would just be saying, Bloodborne 60 FPS, bye. But I don't know. They'll probably just look better. maybe be a stable frame rate or a certain 4K perhaps, but they have released a list of games that are going to be PS5 Pro enhanced, and looking at the list so far, Horizon Forbidden West is the only game that would improve for me, as I did play that game on fidelity mode, as I thought it did look far superior even with the 30 FPS cap, whereas all other games I've basically played on performance mode and could not tell a goddamn difference. But I have the Platinum Trophy for Horizon, so I don't think I'll ever play it again. I have no need to. I've done everything in the game. Yet again, if only they'd said Bloodborne was 60 FPS on PS5 Pro, no one would be complaining about the price. It'd be worth it. But anyway, I think we're going to have to wait for more updates from Sony to find out if this mid-gen console is worth buying. So who is this console made for? Well, for 700 quid, not many, as most people can't justify that much money for a mid-generation console, and only for a real increase in frame rate. It is really made for those who just want the best of the best, who don't care about the money, and that the visual clarity of performance modes in games just simply isn't enough. And I just don't think that there's many people who care. Like me, we like our PS5 console already. We're happy with the performance of it. We're happy with the games. There's no games that are really pushing that hardware to a Cyberpunk-esque level where it's basically unplayable. So for me, would I get it? I mean, I think it all depends on GTA 6, how that performs on these consoles, but it probably is worth it waiting another 4 or so years for the PS6, you know, a true upgrade, or just get a PC for 800 quid. It will be relatively the same performance. So that's all my thoughts. It's been a disaster, this PS5 Pro launch, but let me know your thoughts below. I almost guarantee I know what they are, but like the video and subscribe for more.